Hello, I'm Richard DeVecchio, one of the trustees of the Placentia Library District. On behalf of the other trustees and of the foundation and staff of the library, it's my pleasure to present to you a brief program of early Placentia.
Placentia, a unique city with a strong sense of community and family, built, challenged, born and reborn by the people who called her their home. On our journey today, we'll meet some of her founding fathers and mothers, their children and grandchildren, friends and neighbors. We'll listen to their stories, visit their homes and neighborhoods, and walk the paths they laid for us to follow. Placentia's story begins on land that has served well the hunter and gatherer tribes of Native America for centuries. In 1837, the Mexican government granted Juan Pacifico Ontiveros 35,970 acres. He built an adobe for his wife and 11 children and called his rancho San Juan Cajon de Santa Ana. His land encompassed areas which we now recognize as the cities of Anaheim, Fullerton, Brea, and Placentia. Our story is about the smallest of these, Placentia, a pleasant place. Juan Pacifico Ontiveros raised crops and cattle on his land, digging a ditch to bring water to his new home. The only contemporary account of their life on the harsh land describes him as a hospitable man with beautiful daughters. By 1850, the land known as San Juan Cajon de Santa Ana became part of the United States after California was admitted as the 31st state. In 1849, Juan Pacifico Ontiveros sold the first piece of his rancho, named Cañada de la Brea, to Bernardo Yorba. In 1857, John Froling and George Hanson purchased 1,165 acres, founding Anaheim, Orange County's first city. On May 22, 1863, Juan Pacifico Ontiveros divided up the last of his rancho, deeding 3,900 acres to his sons Patricio and Juanito, and selling the remaining land to Abel Sterns, who later created the Robinson Trust. Sadly, the Ontiveros adobe was demolished in 1973. Only this monument on Crowther Avenue marks the spot where this adobe once stood. But in the words of one of Placentia's pioneers, Faustina Nenno, how simple a beginning for so great a venture. On April 29, 1865, a new settler arrived in the area, Daniel Kraemer. He was a well-educated Midwesterner and described as an old man of 48. He, his wife, and 9 children traveled a grueling 65 days by ship and covered wagon to get to their new home, which was termed Peor es nada, or worse is nothing. Daniel Kraemer bought 3,900 acres of the Ontiveros rancho, including the adobe house, for only $4,600. The Kraemer family found life in Cajon difficult. Beautiful views of the mountains could not make up for the mud in the winter, the dust storms in the summer, the constant hauling of water buckets, and the scraping of old dry tar for fuel. The closest school in the area was located 30 miles south in San Juan Capistrano until 1853, when Bernardo Yorba built a school across the Santa Ana River for his 21 children. The Kraemer children joined the Yorba, Dominguez, Carrillo, and Peralta families at the primitive school, which was no more than one room, made of rough boards and homemade desks. The Santa Ana Uribe, sometimes referred to as the Yorba School, was located across from the Yorba home, near what is now known as the Peralta adobe. Sadly, in 1967, the school burned down to the ground in a forest fire. In 1865, William McFadden, a teacher, traveled to the area in search of land to make his home. He was struck by the thick strand of mustard growing and purchased 91 acres on what is now known as Yorba Linda Boulevard for $10 per acre. With his wife Sarah, his daughter Carrie, and his brother Joseph, they battled the elements, living in a tent at first and then a lean-to. Wild horses trampled the grain, and grasshoppers devoured the fields in a day. Just as they were about to cave into the elements, William was offered a teaching position with a salary of $100 per month at Santa Ana Uribe School. The school had now grown to 40 children, most of whom spoke Spanish. William went on to benefit the growing community for years as a teacher and superintendent of schools for Los Angeles County. Although the surrounding area was growing rapidly, Placentia, which was known as Cajon, meaning box or narrow canyon, was not thriving. Not enough water was the constant lament. Battles ensued over water rights on both sides of the Santa Ana River. Finally, both sides agreed reluctantly to cooperate by digging a ditch or canal. 1871 brought the Wagner brothers, Charles and John, to the Placentia area. After giving up on gold, the brothers bought 100 acres of land for $1.50 an acre and drove thousands of sheep, some from as far away as Montana. Sheep didn't last long in Placentia. In 1877, Placentia suffered from a terrible drought, leaving most of Wagner's sheep to perish. After unsuccessfully trying to raise 2 crops of grapes, Charles Wagner turned to oranges and walnuts, creating one of the earliest groves in the area and becoming a pioneer in the citrus industry. 3 Wagner houses are still standing in Placentia today. One is on McCormick Lane and Yorba Linda Boulevard. One is next to Wagner School, and the other is across from El Dorado High School. The founding father of the Placentia citrus industry was Richard Hall Gilman, who formed the Southern California Semi-Tropical Fruit Company in 1872. Gilman purchased 105 acres of the land adjoining the Kraemer property, and in 1880 planted the first 5-acre grove of Valencia oranges. His small 5 acres is known as the birthplace of the world-famous Valencia orange. Today, Cal State Fullerton now occupies a portion of what was once the Gilman Ranch. Water still remained the most sought-after commodity. Battles continued over the rights, but the canal was enlarged, and this provided some relief. As the population increased, the Placentia pioneers banded together to build a school on their side of the Santa Ana River. Daniel Kraemer donated the land, William McFadden lent the money, and Mrs. Hartley became the teacher for 17 students. In 1878, when the school board could not agree on a name, they consulted Sarah Jane McFadden, who suggested Placentia. It is widely speculated where Sarah Jane came up with the name. The only official record is found in the Fullerton Tribune, dated May 1899. To Mrs. W. N. McFadden belongs the honor of having named Placentia, which is also a place in Italy. The name means delight or pleasure. Social and business groups were formed. The families, the Crowthers, the Gilmans, the Wrights, and the Perotis gathered for musical evenings. There was a racetrack over at Daniel Kramer's place where the men liked to wager. Parties were held for any event. There was a huge celebration called a Day of Rejoicing when the great Cajon ditch was completed. The Gazette, which was the local paper, reported marriages, births, divorces, gossip, even one report that quite a few people had been sent to the asylum. Drama, debate, and literary clubs began to crop up. The YMCA was formed, and Masons and Oddfellows met, but the most controversial group to arrive was the Societas Fraterna, a spiritual vegetarian group led by Englishman George Hind. After purchasing 24 acres on Placentia and Palm Avenue for $1,220, he built a 2-story, 14-room mansion with a round tower so that evil spirits would have no corners to hide in. It is said the mansion cost $10,000 to build, an enormous sum then. In 1931, the Hind House was purchased by S. James Tuffree, who would later tear down all the buildings on the Hind property, including the house. Today, only a macadamia nut tree remains, a reminder of a unique group. As the population grew, so did the need for a new schoolhouse. In 1884, the town came together and built a new 2-room schoolhouse for the surrounding community. To celebrate, a ball was held. The Gazette reported on the evening as celebrating, dancing, bountiful suppers, excellent music, and most attractive and profuse hospitality on the part of the Placentians. The proceeds from the ball were used for a school bell, which later rang out for every occasion. Railroad tracks still bypassed Placentia, a major inconvenience for a growing community, leaving many to rent packing houses in Fullerton. 1890 heralded the arrival of one of Placentia's finest citizens, Albert Sumner Bradford and his family. He had his own packing house, developed the Tesoro orange label, and was on every board in town. Bradford knew water was important to the growing town and formed a water company that built 2 water tanks, one of which can still be seen on Chapman Avenue and Bradford Street. He was gregarious and gave lively parties in a beautiful large house on Bradford Avenue, which he built in 1902. Some of the home's more unique features include a ruby glass window, covered ceilings, a handcrafted hemlock staircase, a large kitchen with pass-through cupboards, and a massive work table with sugar and flour bins, and a double fireplace separating the library and the dining room. The Bradford House is open to the public today and is an excellent example of a modified Queen Victorian home, furnished in an authentic turn-of-the-century style. In 1894, Placentia boasted their first post office, and in 1897, Clara Wetzel became the postmaster. Hugo Wetzel agreed to build a combined home, store, and post office on the corner of the Placentia school grounds. The Wetzel store, the first of its kind in Placentia, advertised a full line of groceries and provisions. 2 years later, questions were raised about the legality of the post office being located on school grounds. Wetzel sold the store to L.W. Head, who moved the store and post office to the northeast corner opposite the school. In 1897, Gilman's Semi-Tropical Fruit Company reincorporated as the Placentia Fruit Company. The Valencia, a widely popular summer orange, was at the center of the town's economy in spite of scale, aphis, and rodents. Fumigating the groves involved tinting the trees and blowing in poisonous gas, a dangerous but lucrative task. John Nenno and his wife Antoinette arrived in Placentia from Pasadena in 1892. Nenno, a fumigator, went on to buy 9 acres on what is now the corner of Placentia Avenue and Palm Drive. Nenno built his family a modest home, consisting of 3 rooms. The back porch contained a hand pump, which pumped water from a cistern for use in the house. Next time you drive north on Placentia Avenue, note the house on the northeast corner at Palm Avenue, and think of the Nennos. George Key, also in the citrus industry, began work building his home on Placentia Avenue in 1898, completing it in 1908. His son writes of the early days. The house father built was a large 2-story that was almost square. There was only wood lathe on the walls. The stairs were open, rough boards. The only heat was the wood-burning kitchen stove. The plumbing was the outdoor type. On a winter's night, when the rain patters on the tin roof and the soft winds whisper in the tall pines around the home, I can hear again the familiar voices of the old walls play back their recordings of the years. What a paradise of people passed through the rooms on such a night. The house and grounds are now an Orange County Historical Park and are open to the public. As the 20th century began, the population continued to grow, and by 1906, Placentia included 96 families. Placentia's pioneers began to build bigger homes. Some of the ones still in use include John Lemke's house on North Valencia, built in 1903, with an unusual feature of the first story made completely of bricks. John Wagner built a concrete craftsman bungalow in 1908 on Valencia Avenue. Placentia was coming into its own. In 1902, a major force arrived in town when the Placentia Round Table Club was formed by the women of Placentia. It evolved into one of the most influential groups in the city. A quote from John Nenno's daughter, Faustina Nenno. "Close the book now, the old book with its worn cover and its pages softened by much thumbing. Lay it away reverently for those future ladies of Placentia who will cherish the record of those who are hewing a path towards a larger and broader way of living, which should become the heritage of all who follow after." Today, the Placentia Round Table Women's Club still gathers and is one of the oldest social groups in the county. The biggest and best news came on March 4th, 1909, when the Gazette proclaimed, "Samuel Kraemer has sold 6 acres in Placentia to the Santa Fe Railway." Hallelujah! In 1910, the first packing house was built, and a year later, the long-awaited Fancy Depot opened. A map showing property boundaries and geographical features of Placentia was filed in 1910. That year, the Margie Building opened, housing the Ibsen and Boyserins grocery store. The Hotel Baker, boasting 33 rooms, was opened on the second floor. A few months later, A.S. Bradford opened the Placentia National Bank on the corner of Santa Fe and Main Street. Bradford was president, and C.C. Chapman and Tilio Parodi and William Crowther were the directors. Santa Fe Avenue was fast becoming the business and social hub of Placentia. In 1914, the Samuel Kraemer Building, on the northeast corner of Bradford and Santa Fe Street, was named the most impressive building in town. Costing roughly $6,000 to build, it was made of black granite and white cement. The building included fronting on both streets, 2 stores, and modern offices on the second story. All of these buildings are still in use today, and we know this area by the name Placita Santa Fe. In 1910, Thomas Strain built a craftsman bungalow on Orange Grove Avenue. His son, Thomas Strain Jr., was manager of the Placentia Mutual Orange Association. He was also one of the designers of several orange packing crate labels. Strain's house was later bought by the popular evangelical preacher, Charles Fuller, the father of Christian broadcasting. By 1912, the population had further increased, and the town moved the school from the small 2-room schoolhouse to a new 8-room building on Bradford Avenue. The old schoolhouse, on the northwest corner of Main and Center, was sold to the Presbyterian Church, who demolished the building and used the lumber to build Placentia's first church and manse. The Bradford School still exists on Valencia High School's campus and is the only remaining school of the period. Today, the Iglesia del Nazareno, or the Church of the Nazarene, occupies the land of the old 2-room schoolhouse. The original school bell that was purchased in 1884 still resides in the First Presbyterian Church on Bradford Avenue. In 1913, William and Josephine Wagner Berkenstock built a magnificent Italian Renaissance home on Berkenstock Lane. The house featured marble fireplaces, stained glass windows, and an unusually large, attractive front yard. Across the street, A.H. and May Baston built Rose Hills Orchards in 1915. It was built from rocks hauled from Santiago Creek. In 1918, Gilbert Kraemer, grandson of Daniel Kraemer, and his wife Angelina Yorba, built a Spanish colonial house with Oriental influences on Angelina Drive. In 1919, Joseph and Emily Wagner built an airplane-style craftsman bungalow on East Yorba Linda Boulevard, calling it the Walnut Grove Poultry Ranch. All of these houses still enhance the streets of Placentia today. In 1914, oil fever hit, and families began digging oil wells. In 1916, a great flood ravaged Southern California and caused much damage. Polio became a widespread epidemic, causing the Bradford School to close its doors for a time. 1917 and 1918 saw the town emptied of young men because of World War I. Some of the draftees included Ernest Boyserins, Stanley Chapman, Gilbert Kraemer, Sam P. Kraemer, and D.F. Lemke. These were hard times. A pleasant surprise came in March of 1919 when the Chapman Oil Well No. 1 produced the first black gold. The gusher came in, blew the top off the derrick, and saturated everything, groves, roads, and homes. The oil boom was on. As the 1920s began, people swarmed into the town, and civilization took hold. The men of the Chamber of Commerce decided it was time for a town policeman. They were looking to hire a good, substantial, middle-aged, well-balanced man who would use his head with no strings to him. William E. Bolden fit the description and was hired at a salary of $75 a month. Under Bolden's charge, many bootleggers were arrested, and a sense of order came to Placentia. That same year, the library was started in a storefront reading room with just 250 books, which were donated by women's groups, including the Women's Temperance Union. The ladies nailed up shelves, put up a flag, hired a librarian at 25 cents an hour, and opened the doors to the townspeople. Placentia was officially incorporated in 1926. Hooray! That same year, a new building was built for the library on Bradford Avenue. It was a wonderful example of the Spanish style, with a red tile roof and wrought iron gates. The families of Placentia continued to donate rare books and works of art. The motto over the fireplace read, "No one need be alone where noble books are found." Buried in the cornerstone was a copy of the history of the library. In 1974, the library became too small for its growing collection and was moved to its current location in the Civic Center Plaza. The original library building is still located on Bradford Avenue and is used today as a community center for senior citizens. The 1930s brought challenges to the city, including the March 1933 Long Beach earthquake and a major fire in 1934 at the Bradford School. Floods were one of the most frequent problems for the growing city. It is said that John Tuffree rowed a boat all the way from Placentia to Anaheim during a major flood. One of the more devastating floods came in 1938, where a wall of water crashed through the La Jolla and Atwood areas of town. The water rose 5 feet in 5 minutes, nearly destroying some neighborhoods. The 1940s saw World War II, and afterwards another great surge in population. Schools were built, churches abounded, clubs continued to be popular. The unique West Atwood Yacht Club was formed, doing good deeds, having fun, and taking place nowhere near any water. Over the next 70 years, the little city that could became the proud city that did. The people of Placentia care about each other and their city. The families that built her are still very much a part of her, not only in present generations, but in street names, parks, schools, and organizations. Faustina Nenno wrote, "To read the records is like watching a weaver at work, making a strong fabric, destined to be passed from generation to generation, for each new generation to add to its length, and in so doing, to add also to its richness of color, and its intricacy and beauty of pattern." Today, the historic buildings and institutions are buzzing with life. Let's take a look. Sarah J. McFadden said at the Placentia Roundtable Women's Club meeting in 1907, "I feel certain all will agree that there is no more favored location in all the Southland than our own Placentia. And though to many of the homes here have come trials and sorrows, certainly all must feel there has been more of sunshine than of shadow. In the bright and happy present, we still cherish the precious memories of the past, and hope the future may be fraught with many blessings for all."